Thanks for joining me today. I have Rachel Crane with me. Rachel and I met through a workshop that we both signed up for. And it's one of those workshops where it's in Zoom and then they break you off into rooms and you talk about a variety of different subjects. Rachel's passion and her knowledge for her subject matter really caught my attention. We connected right after that, which was months ago, and we've been attempting to connect with each other on one of these for a couple weeks. Thank you for your patience and your flexibility in rescheduling. Every time something popped up for me, Rachel, I'm grateful.
Yeah, no problem.
So, Rachel, I was hoping that we could kick it off with you telling the folks that are watching who you are and what do you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is in psychology and education. I worked in public education for about 18 years, and about 13 of those years, I was a high school teacher working as a reading teacher. And these were students who made it to high school and they were not great readers. So I don't know if it was social promotion, if the standardized testing, I'm not sure. It was different for every kid. Some of the kids had minor disabilities. Some of the kids were in honors classes, but these standardized tests were keeping them from being able to take fun electives and they would be stuck in my reading class. So that was some really amazing experience and just kind of just problem solving. Yeah, I would have classes, I think earlier in my career, I had a class of 35, 34, 35 students, all who spoke English as their second language.
Wow.
So I was tasked with trying to teach these teenagers, class of 34, 35, how to become better readers, writers, listeners, and speakers of English. And they all came at that particular school. There were 100 different languages spoken. So it's definitely trying to figure out, how can I leverage the best learning strategies out there that can meet as many kids' needs at the same time when I only have them for 90 minutes a day. So starting from my very first year of teaching, it was hit the ground running, figure things out. I was ill-equipped. A lot of my colleagues, even though we go through so much training, it seems like there's always a new challenge thrown at us that we have to just figure it out. Um, so that was 13 years of classroom teaching. And then I had 5 years where I had the opportunity to train and coach other teachers. And that's really the experience that I'm taking with me into this new chapter of my professional life, where I've started a company called Thrive by Design Consulting, where there's two pieces to it. There's the business to consumer side, where I'm doing one-on-one coaching and personal development. And then the business to business side is instructional design and human performance technology, where it's more than just creating trainings for companies. It's really trying to get to the root of the problem, define the problem, and making sure the solutions that we create together actually address that problem.
You've said a lot there that I want to dig into a little bit, and I'm really interested in some of the techniques that you deployed because as a grown adult, I took college classes to try to learn Spanish as a second language, and a lot of the instruction there focused on learning how to read and write stories. And so I'm curious, what was if you could highlight or narrow it down to just a couple of the most successful tools that you deployed to try to teach, because English is hard to learn. And, Spanish, I've been told, is easy to learn. I'm sad to say I'd never learned it. 5 years of collegiate level education. I passed the classes, but never really learned. And so I'm curious, what tools did you deploy that you found the most success with in doing that? Because I think there's a big difference in the learning mind of a teenage boy versus an adult boy. I didn't notice I said boy.
Well, you'd be surprised at how many strategies we use K through 12 that are the same strategies we use when training teachers who are grown adults. So probably let me backtrack. I wasn't taught strategies as a student. I didn't go to college. I didn't have any real tools or strategies as an undergrad. But then I taught for 10 years before going back for my master's. And I took everything that I taught my students and used for my master's, and what a difference it made in me being a good student and not just kind of coasting and relying on my memory and just trying to figure it out. So, probably my number one tool for students and for adults who are learning content is writing in the margin, paragraph by paragraph. What was that paragraph about? Jot some notes in your own words and asking some questions. So I would always tell my teenagers, if you were the teacher writing a test, from that paragraph, what are the test questions you're going to come up with? So summing it up and writing a couple questions, paragraph by paragraph. And just those two things are probably some of the most powerful tools for studying behavior. Now, as far as the lesson plan or the training designer, something that I learned, goodness, I was probably maybe 10 or 12 years into my career when we adopted this framework for my school district, and we called it the framework for intentional teaching is, I believe, what we called it. And making sure every lesson for students, but then also for teachers, when we were developing trainings, every training had these 5 elements. What's the purpose of the lesson or the training? Why are we doing this, and why is it relevant? And especially for adult learners, with teenagers, they don't want to do work. So you have to okay, this is relevant. This is why you want to know this. But also for adults, no adult wants to sit through a training if they can't see how this connects to what they're doing tomorrow on the job.
Right.
So why are we doing this? What's the relevance of it? Then you want to have some sort of demonstration or modeling. And so in a science class, that could be a teacher-led experiment. In an English class, it might be the teacher doing a read aloud and then kind of thinking their thoughts out loud. So the students can kind of understand, how does an expert thinker, process this information. So trying to make your thinking visible to the learners. So we have purpose, we have some sort of teacher-led or instructor-led modeling or demonstration. Then we have some sort of guided practice. So giving students or the adult learners the opportunity to wrestle with this new information while the instructor or the teacher is circulating and available to cue, to prompt, to ask some questions. Then we move on to collaboration. Learning really is social. It doesn't matter if we're talking about kindergartners. It doesn't matter if we're talking about somebody with 20 years of professional experience. Learning really is social. So any opportunity to hash it out with the person sitting next to you and problem solve together, not only does that help you process the information and kind of chew on it a little bit, but it also takes the pressure off of you to have to independently come up with an answer that you're going to share out loud to the whole group. So it's kind of a more low stakes opportunity to think it through with a partner before you have to share out loud. And then finally is being able to do something independently. So we have those 5 elements. So purpose, some sort of instructor-led demonstration, guided practice, collaboration, and independent. So when you are able to create something for kids or adults that include all 5 of those things, then you've really made that content sticky. So if you have different learners, different learning styles, then you've hopefully kind of hit all of their needs.
Yeah, the learning style is interesting to me. I know I've shared with you before. That to me was like the aha moment when I realized, here's why I'm struggling with absorbing these concepts. It's not my learning style, which is, of course, what gave birth to me doing a YouTube channel. Was I've been out there writing for a couple years and built a pretty good audience because of that. But then it was made abundantly clear to me that I'm missing an entire segment of my audience because they are like me. They're not going to go read my writing because I'm an audio and a visual learner. And to me, what I'm finding, I'm starting to see some change with our educational system now, where the public education system is starting to step back and recognize. I think probably in the last 5 or 10 years, they're starting to step back and say we got to have a better way of reaching these kids. And I'm starting to see that where it's not all about can you read a book, can you memorize the book, can you take the test. It's a lot more effort and emphasis on um, can we teach these kids how to think critically? Can we teach them how to solve these problems? Which, it's for me, I'm in the background, giving a standing ovation because I'm like, yes, because that's not what it was like for me when I was coming up. And I don't harbor any, frustration there because I think we did the best we could with what we had at the time. And quite frankly, I think it's because of teachers like you who say, okay, enough is enough. I'm not being successful. How can I be successful going out and forging new paths, which is what I love about your companies. Is that, now you're saying to other folks, um, who are in that spot, let me help you to do this better. And sorry, that was probably a really awkward transition into let's talk about your current venture.
Yeah, it's amazing the parallels between the work I did as a teacher and the mental problem solving that went into trying to deliver the best instruction I could for my students and the work that I'm doing in the one-on-one coaching, which that part is really interesting because there is no preparation for that other than all the knowledge and skills I've collected over time. I have no idea where that coaching conversation is going to go. And so when I'm in that live conversation, I have to really trust that I've got just a bank of knowledge and skills that's going to be useful in that moment with my coaching client. And so far, you know, I'm a huge reader. You can see just the books behind me is just a fraction. If you could see my floor right now, I've got like stacks of books on the floor. And I love reading nonfiction because I can read. I've got several books going at once because I just pick it up, read a chapter that I need in that moment, put it down, move on to another book. And it's amazing. You don't know when that chapter is going to come in handy. And
Mhm.
I'll give you an example. Um, 2 weeks ago, one of my coaching clients, we were talking about like life management and kind of keeping track of the projects that you need to get done and self-initiation. And I just for fun took a class last summer on project management and learning like lean, agile, traditional project management. And I learned about something called Kanban boards. Are you familiar with that?
No, I've never heard of that.
So, I picture it as, it could be digital or it could be like a poster, but where you have columns like projects that are in the pipeline, projects that are started, things that, in progress, complete. So it's a way to monitor projects where they are in their stage. And so this particular client is an engineer. And so I knew he would connect with the idea of a Kanban board and project management. I had no idea a year ago when I learned about project management that I would be using a Kanban board as an analogy with a coaching client. So it's like you just never know when you're going to pull something from something that you've read or learned. So, as far as the one on one coaching goes, it's really all about self development. And I really focus a lot on the elements of emotional intelligence, self awareness, self management, people awareness, and then relationship management. And no matter where you are and what you're doing, if we're talking about your personal life or your professional life, I believe that everything comes down to emotional intelligence. And without really developing those four components, it's going to be hard to find success.
You're hitting on all my hot button words. And anybody watching this who follows me is going to know what exactly is drawing me to your methodologies because I have been on this emotional intelligence journey now for about 2 years. I believe I have listened to every book written about emotional intelligence. And I'm a constant believer in you've got to always be learning something. And what you just talked about is you never know when that one piece of information that you get out of a book, and it could be a paragraph, a sentence, is going to be that missing key to solve that problem. And a lot of the emotional intelligence stuff I keep going back and listening to because it's helping me to grapple with the harsh reality of the world of it's not all about me, and that the things that are happening around me are happening for me, not to me. And so I love what you're saying because we like to, I'm going to do a blanket statement here, but as leaders, we like to grab onto these famous quotes of, sharpening the sword, blah, blah, blah. But there's so much truth to that because there's so many nuggets that are already out there existing in the world. I don't believe that I'm going to come up with the magic sauce that suddenly solves a problem. What I do believe is that somebody's similar to what you talked about earlier is you'll be on a call with somebody, you'll hear a problem, and they may know the answer. Your job is just to ask questions and guide them down that path. So anyway, sorry about that. I get a little excitable.
Well, something that you said, yeah, I don't know who originally said know thyself, but we really
Socrates.
have, is that a Socrates thing?
Yeah.
There's so much truth to that. Like, if you don't know your values, if you don't know your motives, I don't know how you can exist in the world and have a meaningful existence and make progress and contribute to something.
Yeah.
Some, Something that I've been on a big kick in the last year or so is values. And it wasn't until a year ago that I took the time to sit down, like, what do I value? Like, nobody's ever prompted me to sit down and say, hey, Rachel, like, let's talk about your career. What are your values with your career? And I had no idea. And I knew the answer, but I never really asked myself that question and like defined it for myself. And for me, it's growth and courage. Now, it's not, that hasn't always been my value. I would say growth has always been in there because I'm constantly wanting to learn. I have an insatiable appetite for knowledge and trying to figure out ways that different ideas connect that I can then put into action for students or clients or whoever. But taking the time to define that, and especially with my career pivot, that's where the courage came in because I got comfortable with teaching. I got to the point where, yeah, I felt like I could walk into a class of teenagers without knowing who they are and be able to, I could just wing it because I was confident enough, I had enough experience to where I could wing it and be successful. So courage was never something that I thought about with teaching. But with this career pivot, I've had to do things I never had to do as a teacher. You know, going out and networking, standing up in front of groups of strangers and make a presentation and hope that it lands well, not really knowing much about them beforehand. And just the career change period after 18 years in education, took courage to go from something that was so stable and predictable to something that I have no idea 6 months from now what my projects are going to be and if I'm going to have a month with no income or excellent income. So just having to trust that everything's going to work out.
So the courage thing, I don't want to go somewhere you're not comfortable going with this conversation, but I'd like to challenge that a little bit because I don't know how you can walk into a classroom full of kids of any age without courage being one of your values. Because I've told you before, I have a lot of connections on LinkedIn whose spouses are teachers, and they talk to me, they post about some of the challenges. I also have a lot of friends in my community who are teachers. And the one thing that to me is glaringly obvious is the heavy amount of courage that they have. And so I'm curious, as an educator, you say maybe you didn't realize or it didn't pop in. Um, that is shocking to me because, like, I at this point in my life, I probably could walk in and hold my own. But fresh out of college at 22 years old, I don't know that I could have walked into a classroom and, because kids can be mean, and like the courage that you have to stand in front of that class and paint for them the picture that I'm here to help you and I'm trying to guide you. Because I know when I was growing up, I was a troubled kid, and I hope that none of my teachers ever discover my YouTube channel. But like I was that kid, and I probably shouldn't use the word troubled kid. I probably should use the word I was a trouble making kid. Um, I didn't want to learn. I just wanted to be the funny kid in class. I wanted to be the disruptor. Anything I could do to stop the teacher from teaching, I tried to do it. And I was that kid that graduated high school without really graduating high school. They were just tired of me and like, hey, pass that one, get him out of here. And no slam against the school district. They did their best. But so the courage side of that, when you're dealing with kids like me, that just surprised me. So um, if you don't want to go deep into that, that's fine. But that really shocked me. I wouldn't have expected to hear that because when you talk, I hear plenty of courage in your words.
You know, I wouldn't have called it courage at the time. I think a lot of times, any of us will do things that are scary. Maybe we don't feel scared in the moment, but maybe we're so focused on the mission that we're not even thinking.
Hmm.
So, like, I'm
Yeah.
going into the classroom and I've got these kids who can't read. Like, I'm not thinking about like how this could be scary or intimidating for me. Yeah, I started teaching when I was 20, and I had students who were just a year younger than me. Now, I lied about my age. They didn't know I was 20. I totally, I lied. I don't know if it like made any difference, but it made a difference for me to for me to believe that they thought I was older.
Yeah.
Um, I guess it did take courage, but I just didn't think it and feel it at the time. I was just concerned about getting to them, to reaching them in some way. And I was especially like my first 3 years of teaching at that school where all of my students were learning English. And here we are, we've got kids. I remember the girl who was just a year younger than me hardly spoke any English. She was already married. And I was just so concerned about where are these kids going to end up. They're going to get forced out of school at a certain age. They can only repeat the grade so many times before, like, okay, kid, you're too old. You got to get out of here. And I guess just my concern for them kind of overpowered any fear I may have had.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fair. I can respect that. And that, you know, you're right, because I think that there's plenty of stories that have been written about people who find themselves in a situation where something bad is happening and they go into their zone of I'm not focused on all the noise. I'm focused on this mission. So I definitely can see that as something that you weren't even focusing on until later in life. And it struck me as interesting because some of the most courageous people I know are educators, and I'm always stunned because it I see some of the things these teachers are up against today, and okay, so you take away the political side of it with the things that happen, the school shootings, the school violence, you see videos all the time of teachers being attacked. Take away all that stuff, but then just the emotional intelligence of these kids walking in and what they're dealing with at home. And then you know I don't ever want to know how exhausted a teacher is at the end of the day, because that to me, it's got to be so mentally draining when you're going from student to student and they each have their own personality, their own learning style. And that teacher, and you said, I've already forgotten the number, but you said like 30 to 40 kids in your class.
Yes, that was maybe my second or third year teaching. I had a class of 34 or 35 kids, all, that's that particular school, 100 different languages spoken. And so trying to figure out, so it's not only crowd control, but also, trying to meet all of their needs.
Right. So for those watching, when they hear that and they say 100 different languages spoken, I can only imagine visually they're trying to say, wait a second, where were you teaching? If I remember correctly, this was a military community in Florida, correct?
Yep, this is Jacksonville, Florida.
Okay. Yeah, I did. So I actually I have some clients that live in that area, and we talk about this, and so the parallel was interesting to me, because in their own family they have you know I don't remember. Well, it's not important to this conversation, but they have a blended family. And they're telling me about the community, and we're talking about the challenges that they have, and why they're talking to me is they're looking for career guidance, career coaching to say, I want to get that promotion and I don't know how to get the promotion. And then once they start peeling back the layers, I'm like, it's amazing to me the cultural diversity that is in that community, which I love. But I'm like, it's the challenges of just that is you can walk in the grocery store and you may be surrounded by people that you can't even communicate with because they do not speak your language, and they don't really and this kid speaks three languages, and he's like, yeah, I struggle at my job because there's three senior leaders, and they don't understand me, and I don't know how to communicate with them. So I can't, in a school district where you're dealing with folks who they don't even want to be there. It's not like they're coming there and getting paid to be there. It's not their job. And then you have to overcome all those challenges. Um, I really respect what you do.
I appreciate that. And there are things that I've learned just in the last couple of years, especially with the emotional intelligence and especially like what I've learned about like trauma and what the trauma does to people and your brain. And like I can think back to things I've done as a teacher. It's like, dang, I screwed that one up because I just didn't know about trauma. At the time, I was like, okay, check your drama at the door. You're here to learn. Whatever happened at home, you got to leave that behind. I need you to focus. And we know now that that's not. We can't compartmentalize. We can't. If something happened at home this morning, we can't shut that off. And so there's always something new to learn that adds a layer of challenge for teachers and for all of us dealing with working with other people.
Yeah, you just touched on something that I've been awoken to. My wife and I have been having some of these conversations. Some of the books that she's voicing are delving into some of these subjects of the trauma that you face, and the just life trauma and how it impacts your decision making. We've known for years that people that face car accidents or physical abuse, that they dealing with that trauma becomes a huge part of their life. But I was on a call with a guy named Brian Sangri. He's a retired physician, former athlete, and he's doing a lot of talking now and writing now about living a healthier lifestyle, achieving your goals through discipline. And he and I are chatting away, and he tells me the story about his dad and some of and here's how simple the trauma is. The way his dad was raised, literally with nothing, and then his dad became successful and then lived a life of abundance. And the way Brian tells the story is it wasn't necessarily positively abundance, it was just
Mhm.
overdoing it. And so I'm telling my wife the story, and it's funny, my wife is constantly accusing me of I go way overboard with our girls all the time. And my wife's like, huh, well, this is interesting. And so she's like, tell me more about this conversation. Because my wife has been trying to coach me for 27 years to make better decisions, because she'll send me to the store for one thing and I come back with five. And then I do the same thing. I overdo it on everything. And it's interesting how this trauma impacts, because when you grew up with nothing and then you have something, um, it's hard to kind of keep that in line and live within, less parameters, I guess. I'm not exactly sure the word I want to use there. That wasn't it, but Um, so this trauma that you speak of is powerful, and I don't think there's enough credibility given to it. Could be very simple trauma that you don't even realize happens, but the way someone reacts to you when you say, "Hey, can I have a drink of water?" If that's in a household where maybe it's not friendly, or maybe it's a community where the adage when I was growing up was kids should be seen and not heard. And those things, that simple statement, can add trauma to a kid's life, where they grow up and they either think, well, this is the way it's supposed to be because it's how I was raised, or they never live their full potential because they're constantly living with that voice in the back of their head saying, this is what you should do because so and so said so 20 years ago. Again,
And
another tangent.
sometimes you don't even realize, it could be very unconscious. I heard an example recently, a woman who had grown up, her father was an alcoholic, and she could hear when he would get home in the afternoon, and it would put her on edge. She could hear him, popping a can of beer.
Hmm.
So now whenever she hears like the fizz of something carbonated, it sets her on edge. And it could be a can of Coke. It doesn't matter what it is, but just the sound of that can hitting the counter and the pop and the fizz just, puts her in that fight or flight mode. And, you know, if you think about all the things that could possibly trigger a person, if I'm thinking about all the students that I taught or somehow came in contact with over those 18 years, surely I did something to trigger somebody at some point. I could have reminded them of somebody. I could have, verbally reprimanded somebody, and that reminded them of, somebody else, somebody negative in their past. You
Yeah.
just really don't know. And anything could set somebody off. And there's just no possible way to know those triggers for everybody. So yeah, there's a there's a lot to still learn.
Yeah. And sometimes I find myself when I see somebody lashing out, I find myself focused more on how are they hurting versus what they're actually saying. And sometimes it makes it worse because I'm trying to hear what they're really saying, and I'm not able to hear what their mouth is saying, because I look at them and all I can see is that's pain oozing out of them, causing them to be that way. And of course, the way my brain is wired, I'm like, well, how can I help them? I wonder if I can diagnose this and help them get over that. And really, all they wanted me to probably do is, pick up my laundry off the floor. So
If you are a reader or a listener, I'm on my second read of a book called What Happened to You. It's by Oprah and Dr. Bruce Perry. And the whole thing is kind of like what you just said. Instead of asking what's the matter with you or what's wrong with you, the question is what happened to you?
that's powerful. So you've turned a page in your career, and now you've decided that you're going to give back. And now, obviously, everybody's got to eat, so it's not just I'm going to go volunteer to do this thing, but you've opened a business where you are coaching, you're mentoring. Well, let's talk about that and who your ideal client would be there.
Yeah, absolutely. So for the one-on-one coaching, my ideal client is somebody who's already in the professional world, probably already has several years of experience. Um, Working, profession doesn't matter, but already several years working in the field. And they feel like they've kind of maxed out what they can do on their own. A lot of us are DIYers when it comes to personal development. And I find that we kind of max out what we can do on our own. And so hiring a coach helps. So I would be able to help facilitate the process of self reflection, helping them figure out what it is they want next. So where are they now? Where do they hope to be in the near future? Who is their ideal self? And then giving them the tools and kind of a roadmap to go from their current self to their ideal self. And then my ideal client for the instructional design and the human performance technology would be small and medium-sized businesses that don't have their own corporate trainers in-house. And what I feel sets me apart from other corporate trainers and instructional designers is the piece about, engineering human performance. So I haven't mentioned yet that I had a side business. All those years I was teaching, I had a side business doing behavior therapy with children in the autism community. And so using the science of behavior change as a therapy tool to help reduce maladaptive behaviors and increase more desirable behavior. So using that same science, we apply that to the tasks and the outputs and the outcomes in the business world. And so how can we train employees on the skills and the tasks and the outputs that most align with the business, what the business needs to be successful?
Okay. So these ideal clients that you speak of, how do they find you?
Yeah, so my website is thrivebydesignconsulting.net. I am on LinkedIn, Facebook, and let's see, what's the other one? Instagram. But definitely finding me through my website is the most direct way, probably. And I also created a freebie. So I want to make sure I'll send you that link so you can put it in the description for
Okay.
this video.
That's exciting. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So, number one, I will go out and I also have a presence on Facebook and Instagram. It hasn't caught on really, like the LinkedIn has really taken off and the
Yes.
YouTube has taken off pretty good. But I'll go out and find you today on those two sites, and connect and hopefully be able to support your mission by, what I tell people all the time, the easiest thing you can do, you don't have to buy my products, but just go out, comment, like, share. It's the easiest way that you can support somebody. So please go out and find, and in the comment section of this video, you'll find all the links to track Rachel down. And um, if you don't understand the challenges presented by the education system, whether it is children or adults, I am living proof of those challenges. I have overcome a lot of these challenges myself, and I had to do it DIY style. Is I couldn't understand why I was struggling with certain things, certain learning concepts, um, and I always said, "Oh, I'm a slow learner." And once I found my learning style, that is really what triggered for me my catapult. I've told people before I'm a late bloomer. But there's a lot of people out there like me, and so if you're watching this video and you're like that, um, have your employer watch this video. Rachel is someone that can help them to develop some tools that will help the entire group move forward, and not just those who are book smart. So Rachel, I'm grateful for you taking this time with me this morning. Also grateful for the freebie. I always like to plant little Easter eggs in these to see who actually watches the video to the end. So I think that's awesome that you shared that. Um, any last thoughts you want to share with anybody watching?
My final thought is, I'm on a mission to figure out how to combine the data driven, the results oriented with taking care of people. And so that's easy to do in my coaching world, but especially like in performance management and corporate training.
Mhm.
How do we get people to buy in that it's not always the bottom line? The bottom line is important, but how can we take care of our people so that they want to perform at their very best and impact that bottom line?
That's a powerful sentence. And one of my mentors taught me this lesson a decade or more ago. People don't get up in the morning and decide that they're going to half-ass it. For the majority of the population, they want to get up and they want to get out there and they want to have a productive day. They want to contribute in some way. And I love what you're saying because I think those two things go together. Is as leaders, how do we build a system that empowers them to get up in the morning, excited about what they have to do, and then allow them to go to bed at the end of the night knowing that they made a difference.
Yeah. And all of these things that we talked about today, being trauma informed, taking care of your people, knowing how your employees learn, that's all part of it. There's so many layers that, the leaders of an organization have to go through to really make sure that their people can perform.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. Thank you so much. So
Yeah.
if you're still watching, this is the part where I beg you to subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the notification tab so you're notified when a video posts, and go out and find Rachel. She's not hard to find. The links are in the comments of this video. I recommend you connect, go check out her activity page on LinkedIn. If you don't know how to find that, I've got a video on that too. But that's really where all the magic is. That's really the feed, so you can see the ideas that Rachel's bringing, the subjects that she's talking about, and I guarantee you by the end of the day you'll be as big of a fan as I am. So
Thank you.
Rachel, again, thank you for joining, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks. Thank you for having me.